What's up guys, and thank you for watching another short video from Sterling Trek. This is a short brief history of the Lamborghini V12 engines and the big flagship Lamborghinis that have come our way through the last few 3 or 4 decades. As you'll no doubt be aware, Ferruccio Lamborghini started his sports car company following a less than acceptable meeting with Enzo Ferrari. But what you probably won't know is that he served in World War II, was released from British captivity as a prisoner of war, began his tractor business to help generate post-war Italy's agricultural industry, started a heating and ventilation business, and even attempted to found a helicopter firm. These businesses afforded him a rude financial help that he correctly spent on a fleet of exotic metal, none of which pleased this brutally honest, upfront Italian. He wanted a car that epitomized grand touring, and the perfect GT car needed a big, bold engine, a big V12 engine. This led us to the Ferrari 350 GTV. Framing your entire supercar business, if you want something done properly, you have to do it yourself, was a risky strategy. A strategy that bore its fruit in 1963 at the Turin Motor Show when Ferruccio premiered the Lamborghini 350 GTV. An absolutely stunning car and way ahead of its time. The 350 GTV, the GTV was simply a prototype, a blueprint of Lambos to come, and featured a racing spec 3.5 litre V12 designed from scratch by Giotto Bizzarini, producing around 350 brake horsepower and 240 pounds of torque. Rumour has it the engine had a roll worthy of top racing V12s. Remember guys, we're talking about 1963. That's 350 brake horsepower in 1963. It must have blown people away. Insane amount of power, which then led us onto this Lamborghini 350 GT. Despite its Herculean feat of birthing a supercar with a brand new V12 from scratch, the impetuous Ferruccio was still dissatisfied. He restyled the GTV's body, turning the carrozzeria even touring, and detuned its hard-edged racing V12 for something a little more sober and acceptable for long-distance touring, which then led us on to the 350 GT. Now the Lamborghini 350 GT, again a 3.5 litre quad cam V12, now produced 320 brake horsepower thanks to the softened cam profiles, a lower compression ratio making it less highly strung, and by replacing the dry sump system with a conventional wet sump pan. Despite the changes though, the 350 GT could still hit a top speed of 156 miles an hour. Currently, Lamborghini's future from 64 to 66, 120 GTs were built, which then led them on to the 400 GT, slightly bigger version. Ferruccio was onto something now. He immediately replaced the 350 with a larger 2+2 400 GT, featuring an enlarged 4 litre V12 that produced 320 brake horsepower and headlined 155 miles an hour. The 400 GT, Mr. Lamborghini rather liked this engine, and the last 23,350 GTs were in fact all fitted with this larger 4 litre 12 pot. 254 400 GTs were built between 66 to 68. And this engine would also see service in the Lamborghini Espada in both 325 and 350 brake horsepower format. The front engine Lamborghini Icelero and something called a Miura. Now the Lamborghini Miura, don't thank Ferruccio for the Miura. He was vehemently against the notion of a thoroughbred fire-spitting road racer, instead preferring the quiet and powerful luxury of grand touring. No, his two top engineers, Delara and Stanzani, built a prototype mid-engined racer in the spirit of the Ford GT40 in their spare time and presented it to the headstrong boss. They expected a torrent of swearing and delivered in rural Italian dialect, and perhaps a P45 handing in notice. What they got was a big fat thumbs up. The Miura. It had a 4-litre V12 from the 400 GT transversely mounted behind the cockpit, producing 350 brake horsepower in its first iteration, 370 brake horsepower in the Miura S version, and respectively 385 brake horsepower in the Miura SV. And that body, it made Bertone stylist Marcello Gandini an overnight sensation, and remains to this day one of the prettiest sports cars ever built, without doubt. Which then led on to the 1980s Lamborghini Countach. If the Miura epitomized beauty and spirit, the Countach prefixed Lamborghini's outrageous streak. Witness the scissor doors, that wedge-shaped Gandini designed body, all conceived and built in the eye of the 1973 oil crisis, financial uncertainty for the company, and just before Ferruccio himself sold his shares, waved goodbye and retired to make wine. The Countach continued with the LP400. Countach used the Miura's first 4-litre V12, producing 375 brake horsepower engines. While that engine would swell in the size to 5-litre and finally 5.2-litre in later variants, including a 25th anniversary model producing 455 brake horsepower and 4-valve technology for the first time in Lamborghini V12s. Which then led us on to the 1990s and the Lamborghini Diablo. Lamborghini had at this point been through its mills somewhat. Multiple bankruptcies meant limited production, and in 1987 brought it under the auspices of the Chrysler Group, who took Marcello Gandini's Countach successor design, and Americanized it. The result, despite this interference, is the Diablo, and it was a fast car. Lamborghini Diablo, powered by a bored-out version of the same V12 5.7-litre unit, produced 492 brake horsepower, 428 foot-pounds of torque, and a top speed of 201 miles an hour, making it the fastest production car in the world at the time. It marked a good period for the company too, which finally managed to turn profit thanks to its new scissor-doored supercar. Various iterations would follow, including a VT version and the 4-wheel drive system pinched from the LM002, the 510 brake horsepower SV and the 6-litre 575 brake horsepower SE with a top speed of 205 miles an hour. So Lamborghini had now reached new heights of performance. And then we led us on to the Murcielago, the first V12 supercar to emerge from behind Lamborghini's Audi-owned Dodge. This time was the Murcielago, so named after a famous fighting bull that survived 28 sword strokes in the late 1800s and was later presented as a gift to a noted breeder. The breeder was called Miura. The Murcielago bore a 6.2-litre V12 when it first appeared, immediately signing its name to the Lamborghini engine heritage that started in the 60s. The 572 brake horsepower, a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds, and a top speed of 205 miles an hour was pretty much the epitome of its time, the Murcielago. Again, at the 2006 Geneva Motor Show, the Murci sported an enlarged V12, now at 6.5 litres and power up to 640 brake horsepower from 575, and this engine saw service in the limited edition Jet Fighter Reventon model, which was also up on display. You can check it out on Google, just type in Reventon. And the run-out bells and whistles and mostly orange LP674 SV versions. That car, that bewinged tango-livered behemoth, the 670 brake horsepower, made Richard Hammond a very happy camper. Finally, we see today's Aventador, a brand new hand-built 6.5-litre V12 debuted at the new Aventador, producing 700 brake horsepower, 500 foot-pounds of torque, and a V12 that weighs just 235 kilograms. Revs all the way up to 8,250 RPM. It sounds quite nice too, as you no doubt heard from last night's motor show that was aired quite recently. So that was just a brief history from Sterling Tech of the big V12 litre engine Lamborghinis. Again, an amazingly pretty car with an awesome heritage, something that I didn't come across before was Ferruccio was actually a prisoner of war, but there you go, fortunes can turn, and he certainly turned this into a thing of beauty. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Every single view is much appreciated, and have a really nice day.